Hello and welcome to another edition of the How to Bet the Kentucky Derby podcast, 2018 edition, episode 3 with Emily Gullikson of Optix. Ed DeRosa here, and Emily, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ed.
Well, one of the things I really enjoy about the Derby is its long history and a lot of the tradition that goes with it, and the overanalyzing, which I know rates on some, but I can't get enough of it. Some of that stuff, a little esoteric, maybe not as applicable, like the Apollo curse probably isn't going to show up in a lot of software that's crunching the Derby numbers. But the information in Optix, whether it's run styles, trip notes, things like that, much more germane. And I've enjoyed digging in for the past week or so. How about you? What sorts of things from the materials available there have really caught your eye and helped you maybe get an edge over the other 100,000 people that are going to be betting this race next week?
Yeah, and I guess as far as the edge goes, is that we've just been watching these horses since the debut and have multiple eyes on them that do this, day in and day out, tens of thousands of notes. So we're applying what we do on the day in and day out to these horses, not just, kind of how people are sort of spot looking for, something for Derby or just jumping in and out, watching a replay here and there. We're watching full car. We've been watching these horses since the beginning of their career. So I think that does, kind of give, us obviously, that are inputting the data, but also to Optix users that have been able to kind of follow these horses, sort of see what kind of trips they've had, when they're supposed to win versus kind of when they're not supposed to win, that type of form cycle stuff or trip stuff that comes into play. And then, sort of handicapping really, it stays the same for the most part, just following, is the horse classy enough? Is it going to get the right trips fast enough? And coming into the race the right way. None of that really changes going into the Derby, still kind of focusing on the horse itself.
Yeah, now we don't want to obviously give away the store and the secrets of this individual Derby, but you're no stranger to seeing all the chatter. In general, are there any pitfalls of handicapping? And it seems to get amplified around Derby because so many more people are paying attention and trying to interact and, in worst cases, trying to sound smart if they're not. But any pitfalls you find the mistakes people make when handicapping a race like this, where you have the data, whether it's up against your notes or the performance of the plot, things like that just kind of say, hey, that's not actually how it works?
Do you mean like Optix for Optix or just like in general?
Well, if you have either way. I mean, if general is something that came to mind, that's fine too. Obviously, your handicapping experience is varied.
To just not really do, use information that's much different than what you already do. If you're, I think of workouts was like the first thing that just kind of jumped in my head, because everybody on the PA has access to these workouts. And, what you have to keep in mind, at least from my experience, both using, going from using clocker notes, which I still use, and I've been using since I started playing horses, to actually like physically clocking, is understanding, that work in context. If a horse is a good worker and they put on a good work, that is who they are. It's something that you'd want to look for a change. And if you don't really have any context on what that change is, it's hard to put in a lot of weight. Like, you really want, if you like a horse and it goes with everything that you handicap, and you see, a workout report, oh, this horse, is bad, and, that type of stuff, you would hate to talk yourself off a horse you like by using a bit of information that, you don't normally use or you don't have context of. That's kind of like the first thing that pops in my head. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I love clock information. I think it's absolutely valuable, but you just have to really understand like where that comes from if you're going to use that piece of information.
Yeah, it's definitely not just about, okay, and as you said, people kind of pop in and out, whether it's a race replay or works. You can't just pop in on, the 28th for one training session and get an understanding of what that means for the horse's form. Absolutely agree 100%. And speaking of form, one question people look at, and, these horses are looking to run the race of their life. That doesn't always is the case that the Derby is necessarily their best number. In terms of projecting or, coming up with a line of the varying horses you think can win, most likely contenders, things like that, do you look for, okay, they're poised for a career best effort? Are you looking for them to maintain already good form? Sort of what's your thought process on what it takes to win the Derby, versus their own performances recently?
I would say one of those two is that if you have a horse that, is maybe a number that's like a little bit below, but still like a winning number, somewhere that's like kind of like, fifth or sixth best, let's say, for example, is that horse able to move forward a little bit if needed? That's something that you have to be thinking about. And then with some of these horses that have that have established form and that have established numbers, are they in a position that they're going to run that again? So those are the things that I'm looking at. If a horse is, just really far down the list, like let's say they're like the 15th, if you're just looking at speed figures alone, fastest horse, and has to make up 20 points on, whatever system you use, is that horse capable to do that? Those type of things. But I'd be looking more for, those horses that are kind of at the top, whether they're going to be able to make a little bit of improvement given the pace, given the distance, or those horses that are already at the top if, those same type of circumstances, distance, trip is going to kind of like knock them down a peg. And that's what I would be, that's what I'd be looking for. And of course any like kind of like overwhelming like red flag type stuff on horses that are short prices, but just kind of looking over it right now, it doesn't really seem like, any of the horses that project to be the favorites have like real, negatives on them.
One of the biggest stories, seemingly based on the current field, the storylines in terms of handicapping this Derby, is the projected pace and the trips that will follow from that. Most expect Promises Fulfilled to get the first call on the lead. Some wonder just how much Justify might want to take it to him, whether it's a Bodemeister situation, who was ahead of eventual champion sprinter Triniberg in his Derby, or like Always Dreaming, who was just off State of Honor last year, who ended up 19th and last of those who finished. Any thoughts to what we're going to see into that first turn and just how fast Promises Fulfilled will go and who will be with him?
Yeah, I mean, I think based on Promises Fulfilled, just kind of overall as a horse, I mean, he's really only got one option, and that is to go. I mean, if he wants to win the race, he needs to get out in front and just, hope that he can hang on, right? Like that's right. He's not going to be able to pass. If Justified gets in front, he's not going to be able to pass him. So that's, if you're handicapping that horse, that's his one scenario, to kind of win, right? Based on what we know about this horse. A horse like Justified is going to be forwardly placed. He doesn't have to necessarily like hook up with him in a duel, but he could sit right off. He could still be forwardly placed and at least being in that first flight. And that's, if I'm looking at the Optix plot and I compare that to the grid, that's what I'm seeing. Justified will be forwardly placed, without a doubt. And then also looking at the plot, I mean, we don't have him plotted because he last race was in Dubai, Mendelssohn, but you have to expect Mendelssohn to be in quadrant 1 and likely a square as well. So from that perspective, I don't see Promises Fulfilled kind of sticking for the distance. He'll go as far as he can, as fast as he can, for as long as he can, maybe hang on for a minor at best. Whereas, kind of if those horses do tend to separate, it'll be Justified and Mendelssohn sort of in that last, kind of 3/8 there. I don't necessarily say like a match race scenario, but it definitely could be like one outcome.
Absolutely, yeah, and to me the question then is, there is people say, oh, well, Promises Fulfilled, so expected hot pace, and horses will engage him, which I agree with. I think there's no way they just let him click along and he's on the lead at the quarter pole. I would just be shocked. So that lends to how far back can you be and how much does the pace come back to you. I happen to think Justify is a good enough horse, even though I'm against him as the favorite. It's hard for me to see that the deep closers are going to be in a position to win unless he and Mendelssohn both absolutely throw in clunkers. So for me, it's sort of a mid-pack presser becomes optimal. Do you see any deep closers having an impact on the win end?
No, I see it the same way as you. I mean, I could see a scenario where, it is Justified Mendelssohn and then looking for sort of those, kind of mid-pack horses are the most likely. I mean, even from, if you're looking at the deep closer horses that are in here, I mean, really, if I'm looking at Plot, Combatant, and My Boy Jack, I mean, I just don't think that they're the best horses right now. So it's, it's hard because they already, they're going to have the pace scenario against them, and they're already, not the best horses in the race. So they're kind of up against it. But then you start getting into horses like, Audible, that's tractable, Bolt d'Oro, obviously. Dino Rosso can be a little bit versatile, just kind of like looking at the squares and going through the plot. Noble Indy should be sitting a really great trip. Good Magic, and who else am I forgetting? I think those are kind of the ones that, should be sort of hanging around right in that spot.
And then find out if they're good enough or how good they are, depending on if improvement's needed. Any horses you've sort of heard, whether it's wise guy to use the cliche or just, popular fan favorites that might take money that you already have a sense you're going to be against or you don't really understand the admiration for?
I don't think so. I mean, I think everybody's kind of, it seems like there's horses that are contenders this year, and then there's horses that are really on the outside. And I haven't seen any of those horses that are, on the outside. Like, I haven't seen anybody that's like, on the flame away band camp, that really like gonna do it. I haven't really heard, I haven't really been on Twitter that much lately to kind of, follow in there. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I guess like if I had to pick kind of a horse that's like a crazy horse that I think, could run a big race is again, Bravazo. And it's hard for me right now to be like, yeah, he's like a main contender, but just sort of like the horses that aren't super obvious. One that I'm a little bit more interested in. I think he had an excuse somewhat for the last race, coming in kind of 2 big efforts and then, not running that well in Louisiana Derby, but getting some rest and kind of getting back to his better effort. And then, Fitz, he's a circle right there, but a lot of that is because of that last race. But position-wise, he's in the same spot as some of those other horses. So if he's sitting on a good race, he could be sitting right there. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of seems like those. Are there any like crazy ones that you've heard?
Well, I mein seemingly Hofberg, I think, is going to be sort of the sexy long shot pick, and admittedly, I like him in part. Yeah, it was a cozy trip, but I like Audible. So for me, the Florida Derby, the runner-up at 3 times the price is Audible. Sort of intrigues me. Disappointed he's not the best plotted horse by any means, but again, the price I think sort of compensates some of the misgivings, and with only 3 career starts, room to grow. But I would definitely say he's the one, like, of the expected 30-1 horses that might actually take a little bit more money than that.
Yeah, I could see that as well. And I mean, he's a horse that's just, obviously he's got a lot of talent and, ran second in the Florida Derby, which is a big pass coming, kind of coming into that off a good maiden race. And that's pretty much it. I mean, he's got a lot of upside, but, again, he's got to kind of step up to the competition. I think he's a very talented and there is a lot of upside. It's just, is this the spot is kind of the question with him. But, that's, if you're getting a price compensation, then you can sort of play with those what ifs.
Right. And I will, and I just have no interest in a race like this and it's come into the last 3 years, so it's not like it can't happen, but, taking the top 3 or 4 choices and boxing them around and things like that. Like there's to me just too much talent. Maybe not on the win end, like you said, Flame Away. Not that I really like them all that much underneath either. But to me, a horse like Bravazzo or Lone Sailor, 30 or 40 to 1 is the type I want to hook up with. A couple of the more logical ones. Certainly not all of the logicals on the same ticket.
Yeah, Lone Sailor seems like the horse that everyone's like, that's my underneath key. Like, I guess kind of going back to your question, I guess he's the one horse that I've heard that everybody sort of,
right.
That's the one I'm keying for the underneath spot. It doesn't mean that there's not, as not going to be value there, but I guess that one being like the wise guy opinion from that situation.
Yeah, especially after the super fast work, and we should see him back with another published move Thursday or Friday. So yeah, a lot of eyes on him for sure. He's been here a while, so that always helps.
Right, and I think people sometimes forget that, like, with a horse like Lone Sailor that does kind of come from off the pace, that there's horses that if the pace is not too contentious and it's not too hot, horses that are forwardly placed will hang on for that 4th spot. They're just going to kind of be there by default, even though they're up and down late and they're tiring. There's just so much distance they can. They can kind of hang on to a piece. And I think sometimes people sort of forget that, that maybe, a promise is fulfilled, hangs on for 4, even though, this distance is going to be life or death for him. This track does weird things, and maybe he's just in, kind of the right spot for something like that.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of the track, I don't know if you read my mind, but was going to point out you will have full card selection, so not just the Derby, but Oaks and Derby Day at Bristnet. And Churchill can be kind of funky. We hear about turf pedigrees, maybe like in the track here, depending on where they are on the turf, and there's several big turf stakes next week. Depending on where the rail is, that plays a role in sort of how the turf plays, et cetera. Any general thoughts to your handicapping process for Oaks and Derby days and the big pools throughout the 2-day period, and sort of how you approach run styles here and horses coming into opening week?
I'll watch, but and that'll sort of upgrade my handicapping process maybe a little bit, put more emphasis on certain horses if I really feel like, the track, but it can change so much. We've seen it change throughout the day. I think it was on Oaks Day last year, there was like a real extreme bias, and then we had those 2 turf races and then a break, and then by the time, the Oaks ran, like the track changed completely. So, there's things like that can happen that it's hard to kind of, adjust so much. I think that's why, a lot of times if you see like my handicapping related things we put out from Optix is you're getting more an idea of like how you want to play, the race itself. Is this race, is this a race that you kind of have like a few key horses, like 1 to 3 horses you think is key or spread or chaos or, legit favorite, things like that. And then that gives you a little bit more flexibility as far as, race to race, horse to horse, what kind of, way you're going to play that type of a race. And remain flexible and do your work, have good information. If you start seeing, especially with the plot, we've seen from Derby's past, I'll pay extra attention to the squares. They win. Those are horses I'm going to look at, that would be foolish to like not, consider those horses. Things like that, you have good information that you trust, that you can rely on, and, not kind of change your game and the way that you play. Because that's like the worst feeling is, getting out of your own way and then making mistakes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of noise to distort the signal for sure, but and that's part of why I like doing these, not necessarily because people should listen and say, oh, I need to handicap that way, but to show, talking with you or Scott or Gus or Pete Dank, who does the patterns of motion analysis, which is a unique way of looking at the race, that, there's different ways to approach it, and maybe you can use some of those ideas in improving your game. But by no means should you just adopt, someone else's approach. You need to make it your own no matter what. So hopefully, people get that from this, and we all improve, but not so that I can't take other people's money. We don't want everyone improving, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of one thing that we've always struggled with Optix from the beginning, and still get comments here and there. It's like, well, who does Optix like in the race? It's like, we haven't developed it to be that good yet. It's information, and then you have to interpret it, and both John and I, that probably spend more time on this than anybody, will still look at a race and have different opinions, and, one of us will be right, the other will be wrong, or both will be wrong, or right with some trips different. So it's, having good information and knowing how to apply it, and having a system. If you approach the race, which I think, you do, and we've talked about this in the past, where, you have to start, is this favorite a good favorite? Is this a horse that you're trying to beat, a horse you're trying to maybe spread, whatever that process is, that doesn't change, for these big days, or, race to race. You want to kind of stay with that system and let variance kind of work into it.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree. The only downfall is it's once a year is the Derby, so unfortunately you can't keep grinding away at it and push your edge until a year later. But the pools are so big, the money is so dumb very often, where you just don't get that in any other race. I do feel like even if it's not the strongest opinion you'll have all year, that you're just compensated for taking a swing, and people like you or me, or really anyone who puts time into this, has an edge over the 100,000 people at Churchill who are just betting numbers, or betting because they read about this horse in the Courier Journal, or so and so owns it. All those things that go into betting the Derby that make it fun for them, hopefully, is more profitable for us. So it's a big reason I like to take a swing, even when every year you're not going to have a stronger opinion than the year before, or maybe you will, but I just think the pools compensate you so much, it's worth a try.
Right, and they're the pools are so big on the other races too. So let's not forget that. I didn't like Always Bathing last year. He beat me. I got over it pretty quick. I wouldn't have bet that after that was my opinion. And I'm sticking to it. I wouldn't have changed it. So, there's other races on the card, and I did well at other spots, and that always, takes the sting out a little bit. But, it is once a year. You want to hit it. You want to try to take a shot. But also, you want to play for value. If you don't like a horse and it's a short price and you want to play against it, just be bold, and go for it. And again, there will be another Derby next year. There'll be another race 20 minutes later. Things like that. I did have a question though, and maybe because I started to watch the workout show, but I'm watching it on replay. Did they name a rider for Noble Indy yet?
They haven't. So Noble Indy and Bravazzo are still without a jockey, although it does seem like Florent Giroux is the favorite to be named on Noble Indy, but nothing official yet for either. So yeah, personally, I think, given how we ran at Louisiana, I wouldn't mind seeing either Florent or Julian, who's also available. I think either could fit his style. Do you have a jockey in mind you're hoping they name?
Well, I had two thoughts. Giroux wasn't one of them, just because I'm a little sour because of Hens last year. But I thought maybe Rosario would be a good fit for him. I don't think he's named on anybody. I don't know how much he rides for Pletcher. And then the other thing
I think with Instilled Regard in, he's riding him.
Oh, is he? I guess being 21 or something, getting it? Okay. And then I was like, well, just because I was watching the thing and I saw Super Saver on the jacket, I was like, man, I really hope Calvin doesn't ride. He's the Pletcher horse I'm the most interested in, and if he shows up, he at least just gets talked about, where now I think he's getting forgotten, and he's a good horse. So
Yeah, I think what will have been 6 weeks on Derby Day, he went first and won the first big race, but then since then we've had Mendelssohn and Justify and Magnum Moon's undefeated out of Arkansas, so it just kind of took a bit of the buzz away. Being that far out, I agree. I think he'll, and unless Calvin's named, I think he'll actually be longer odds than he should be because of it. It's just sort of one of those out of sight, out of mind situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, Emily, I really appreciate the time. Great stuff as always. Encourage people to visit Optix not only for Oaks and Derby Day, but throughout the year. And you're adding tracks all the time, which I love because they're usually the smaller ones since you've had the big ones a while. But Will Rogers Downs definitely was one I enjoyed recently. Hopefully, Thistledown won't be far behind with its opening day, but great stuff day in and day out, and really looking forward to Derby week with you and John.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we're adding stuff because you guys asked for it. So we really listen to any type of feedback and try to work with it. So, and we sort of pride ourselves on that, being accessible and listening to the horse players. I mean, that's where we came from. So I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Again, that's OptixEQ.com, and then the picks for next week at brisnet.com/Derby. And I'm sure in and out of social media for you as well. I don't know your new handle off the top of my head. Do you mind to share?
Yeah, it's at Emily at OptixEQ.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Emily, everyone, from OptixEQ, I'm Ed DeRosa. This has been episode 3 of How to Bet the Kentucky Derby podcast. We will be back later this week with some more information on the Kentucky Derby. Thank you.